Hi, everyone, and welcome to the last week of our term. And I can't believe it's the last week. Um, so I just wanted to provide a final video that just goes over some of the, final things, mostly probably the podcast project. Because the other assignments are our typical Yellow Dig discussions as you're wrapping up watching Generation Kill. But I did want to say that for feedback from everybody to kind of garner, things that people liked, things that people liked less, where obviously this is, like I said in the beginning of the course, we're all kind of a little bit of guinea pigs. I obviously have my own feedback on the course. I probably have way more feedback for myself than anybody else on the course, or my own. I probably have the majority of feedback on the course because I'm seeing it from a variety of lenses. And but anyways, it's been a really interesting term, and working with Yellow Dig has been kind of an up and down process. But so I'm curious to see how other people, like, your thoughts on that versus, say, regular discussion posts and that you would see in other courses, and that I have in my other courses that I teach, and just things of that nature. So, but anyways, outside of that, our last module, we've moved on to got the we're at the final 3 episodes of Generation Kill. And I know that, so some of you, I think, may have seen this series before. For some of you, it may be your first time watching it. It was my first time watching it when I was working on this course, and I watched it with my husband. And it was a little rough to get through, but I have a lot of thoughts on Generation Kill that I will keep to myself, because there are a lot of kind of like arguments I would make about things along the lines of what you guys are writing, and I don't want to plant any seeds or give away my own kind of personal interpretations of things. But as I said, I think in my last video, that that one of the most valuable things I think there is right now about Generation Kill, the series, is its visual representation of these recon Marines and the Iraq War, of which very little visual representation exists in pop culture. And it's not just visual representation of the Iraq War. It has been lauded by a really interesting, diverse group of entities, from military entities all the way through your typical Hollywood entities, as being a highly authentic portrayals of recon Marines and the Iraq War. And I believe, if I remember correctly, one of the original recon Marines that the Rolling Stone journalist who, Evan Wright, the original writer of Generation Kill, the book, the Rolling Stone journalist is him, is portraying him. He, I believe one of the original Recon Marines also stars in this. And so I know that he's maintained a very close relationship with that original unit. And as I noted before, they were all pretty much considered, or not considered, but they helped to consult on the show, the Recon Marines. And I think some of them, there was some kind of pushback from the military on this. They had to walk a really fine line, but they did it. They kind of stood their ground, and they helped out. But there is one character, and I cannot remember his name, and it's the one they're always saying is always looking pretty, and is very obsessed with the way he looks. He was in the original Recon Marine unit, and he's also starring in Generation Kill. So, and of course we got General Mattis in there as well. And if you aren't familiar, I do note it, I believe in Module 8, that he does go on to much higher levels under President Trump. I believe, I won't look for that now. I don't want to say Secretary of Defense, but that might be what it is. But he does go on to become quite a high level, to attain a very high level position within the Trump administration. And we see General Mattis quite a lot in Generation Kill. But so we're down to the final 3 episodes in Generation Kill. As I was saying, it was a little difficult to watch for me, not because I didn't like it. It's just I have a lot of reasons why, but I'm not going to get into that. I'd say for a lot of the same reasons, Moby Dick is a difficult read, and now is not the time to compare those things. Again, I have another supplemental soundtrack, and I put these together because it's interesting when you have, on one hand, you just did a blog on this idea of disposable children, and this idea of Generation Kill, and what is Generation Kill. And it's this idea of those soldiers who got deployed to, say, the 2001 Afghanistan and 2003 Iraq. And those periods, a lot of people were arguing, this is the first real video game generation, and these are also, soldiers who've grown up with a lot, from a lot of kind of urban, I don't want to say street warfare, but that's sometimes, like, coming from LA, like, I understand what that language means. When you have this kind of urban combat setting, I understand when these kind of gang situations. I come from originally Chicago, and now I'm in Los Angeles, so I understand that type of situation. Like, when they talk like that, I know what they mean. But this idea of the first video game generation, where where, you have a lot of people who are used to looking at a screen and playing FPS games, FPS RPGs or MMORPGs, and then going off to war. I think there's a lot of potential logical fallacies there, but at the same time, it does create a different type of soldier, not necessarily a worse soldier. And that's what a lot of those arguments that were being made in that article / essay on disposable children were, and then some other argument. You can find a lot of research on this, kind of this idea of the new soldier, which is this, if we look at the soldiers from, say, World War II to Vietnam, the Korean War, and then you look at soldiers in the 21st century, there's a shift, there's a difference. Why is that? And so there's people who try to better understand that, and also try to better understand, like, the DoD's perception of those soldiers. Do they see them as disposable, as people just to throw at something, versus, and how does drone warfare work with that? So, and they're still, but are they still disposable given some of the circumstances of drone warfare? So there's a lot of questions that surround these types of things. But when you have something like Generation Kill, there's no music in it, which is really interesting, except what the soldiers sing themselves. There is some music provided in the very last episode for an intentional reason. So the soundtrack is meant to provide some historical musical context, but also just to give you an idea of what they're singing, what the references they make to songs. So it's also meant to be part of historical context of Generation Kill, but also just to give more of kind of an audible landscape to Generation Kill, because the soundscape that we have for Generation Kill is, when you think about it, it's quite empty. There's a lot of dialogue, and we have a lot of sounds of, like, machinery, and maybe some, just general sounds of existing. And then we have sounds of combat. But outside of that, we don't have things that we might typically expect sound-wise in a show, especially about war. Music is meant to kind of change your emotions during certain scenes and something like that. So you don't get it. You get it blank. Here it is. This is what it is. Deal with it. So anyways, moving on to, you're done with short essays, you're done with blogs, coming up on the end here. You've got your final 2 Yellow Dig discussion, or you're being asked to really look at titles of the episodes and analyzing titles, whether they're episode titles, titles of texts, titles of poems, titles of anything. It's always important. It never used to be. Titles weren't actually like important until, I'd probably say like the 19th century. So before that, the title was just a very basic thing. I mean, if you look at, again, as a Shakespearean, Shakespeare's titles are just trash. I mean, they're not good. As you like it, it's like, thanks. Great. That's really helpful. All's well that ends well. Great job, Shakespeare. Romeo and Juliet. Thanks for giving us the two names of the protagonists. Julius Caesar, another protagonist. Richard III, protagonist. Richard II, protagonist. They were meant to be informative to some degree. So you have the tragedies, Romeo and Juliet, Titus Andronicus, Hamlet. These are all tragedies. Coriolanus, Timon of Athens. They're all names, right? They're all the names of the protagonists. Othello. That's just giving people the information about what the play is. Oh, this play is about Othello. Oh, thank you. Now I know. This play is about Hamlet. He's the Prince of Denmark, which is also part of the title. Oh, great. I know what I'm seeing now. And it's also the tragedy of Hamlet, the Prince of Denmark. That's the full title. So it's informative. It's not meant to be analyzed. So that if you were going to see in 1600, 1601 a performance, you'd say, what am I seeing? Oh, it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy of Hamlet. Apparently he's the Prince of Denmark. Great. I have an idea. I'm not seeing a comedy. I know what I'm seeing. So that was the purpose of titles, is they were meant to convey information. They were not meant to be part of a text or an extension of the text's kind of interpretation, whereas they are now, because now we have many other things to tell us information. So, the comedy of errors. Great, I'm seeing a comedy. Thanks for letting me know. Oh, and it'll have a lot of errors in it. That's wonderful. Just a great title namer. It's just trash names, really, but informative. You knew what you were going to see. This one's going to be on Henry IV. Okay, great. It's a history play. I really good to Henry V. Okay, Henry VI. Good. Henry VIII. Great. Get all the Henrys covered. So they did their job relatively in terms of just getting the information out about, so you'd have some idea of what you were going to see. But we don't need that anymore, because you can look on 80 million websites and figure out what something's about. So people now have the ability to create more creative titles, or titles that can be analyzed in addition to the text itself. And that's been going on, like I said, probably since like the 18th, or maybe the late 18th century, but definitely the 19th century. So analyzing titles and then focusing on the ending, how Generation Kill ends ultimately. And then we have the final podcast, which is your final project for the course. And so there's when I was reading through everybody's kind of podcast selections, it's definitely a good mixture in there of kind of what everybody's doing. So I'm looking forward to these, see how they'll turn out. And my former chair then became dean, and then she had to come back to be an interim chair, and then she's going back to her dean position because we've been having issues with our getting a consistent chair in our department. She teaches a course where she does a podcast, and so she was excited to see this assignment here because she did the academic review for this course. So she and I talked a lot about this, and so I'm excited too. She actually does a podcast series in her course, which is her students do. Like they do a podcast series across the term, across the 9 weeks, and they also do something like this. So they do like a variety of things. So I talked to her a lot about this assignment. But the podcast, I give you a time limit, about 10 minutes, but 10 to 15 minutes. If you're writing your script and you're starting to time yourself and you're concerned that you don't know if you have enough to meet 10 minutes, or you feel like you're going longer than 15 minutes, just reach out to me and let me know, and I can try to help wiggle you around and say, here's how we can get you, to the required length. I always have a problem with going over time or going over word count. That's always my problem. I always have a problem scaling back. So if you have a problem scaling back, I also know how to scale back because I've had to do it so many times. So if you are also having that problem, I can also help you with that. Remember, there is this one document that just has everything in one place for you. You do need to turn in both the link to the podcast as well as your script. So you didn't have to do that with the banned book video project. So you didn't have to submit a script. But for the podcast, you do need to submit your script as well. So, and I give information here about that. I'm not going to read through that. And I do say here that, the podcast has unique items to the podcast genre, like the production elements. So the sound and the guest that you're going to interview. And I'm just recognizing here that you're going to have a script, but you can script the questions that you're going to ask your guests, but there's always those conversations that are what we call extemporaneous, or off the cuff. So you can't necessarily script. I even use the term off the cuff there. So but you can't script how they're going to respond and then how you're going to respond to their response. So I don't anticipate those things being written into the script. I anticipate the questions being in the script, but I don't anticipate you then later going in and being like, let me transcribe everything. You don't need a transcription of the full podcast. Just where you're asking the questions in the script is sufficient. I always, as usual, am reminding you that the virtual communication lab is always available for everybody to work with. And I will always say they are amazing. And I try to break down here about, here's the different things that you want to be thinking about in terms of what your podcast needs. So an introduction, some background music somewhere, and at appropriate places throughout. At least 2 people speaking, which increases that auditory interest. And then a conclusion, which is just where you kind of, obviously, you don't have to be like, in summary. First of all, this is the one time where I would say, like, in writing, we never write in summary or in conclusion, like in an essay, because in a written form, we know by virtue of it being your final paragraph, we know it's your conclusion. In an auditory setting, it's probably, this is the one time where I would be like, it might be helpful to give that linguistic cue of, you could say in summary or in conclusion. I don't know that it's the best, but it could make sense because we don't have writing in front of us to be able to say that's the last paragraph. I know now that it's your conclusion, even though, there will be a script. Your script doesn't necessarily have to be an essay. It could be, 1, 2, it could be however you want it to look. Analysis and research. So just, you need, so I have, here I do have specific source, a number of sources that you need. So you not only have to include evidence from the texts that are from the module that you selected, but 2 peer-reviewed sources from the Hunt Library that you incorporate into the podcast to support your argument or offer a counter argument. And then, not going to read these things, but this all has to do with analysis. And that's just something that I have emphasized throughout the entire course is analysis, 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 analysis. Because that is critical thinking, critical thinking, critical thinking, critical thinking. And that's what we want more than anything. So, and then there's information here on how to, and reminders on how to submit it. And again, I've given, these are the same things that were available to you in the previous week, which are these same videos, as well as additional resources. So if you have questions about your podcast or this project, I'm obviously, as usual, available. So don't hesitate to reach out or contact me. And I'm super curious to hear them, and I'm super excited. And I do want to note that while I'm not even going to say anything. I have on here to have somebody else there with you for the podcast. I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to see what you do with it. I'm going to give the creative license to you. So, but yeah, and also remember, as I've always said before, that to look at your rubrics, because these are how you're graded. I know they're wordy. I wrote them, but that's only because I like to try to be as specific as possible in rubrics. So, but being graded on, what the conceptual, which is engagement with and command of course materials, class discussion and assignment, research and evidence integration, analytical insight or provocation, meaning, and provocation means like, oh, wow, that's really interesting. Like, I hadn't thought of that. Or you're putting forth some really unique and innovative or interesting ideas. You really kind of, you know, doing analysis in a way that is provoking new thought, or, so, and that's like ideal. Delivery. So elocution is how we talk. It's how we enunciate. It's kind of like the difference in like mumble rap. Like mumble rap has terrible elocution versus like Eminem, who has perfect pronunciation. I'd say he has really good elocution. But elocution is where it, you speak very clearly, you have good pronunciation, you are mindful of what you are saying. It's very easy to kind of get off track. I'm a daydreamer and I live in my head. So I have a tendency to, even when I'm talking to my computer, giving like these types of videos, or even if I'm just talking to somebody else, I can very easily just get sucked back into my head and I will just babble on because I'm not really present, because it's better in my head. Everything is better in here. It's been that way my whole life. Enthusiasm and pacing, meaning you're not going too fast, you're not going too slow, you're not filling things with fluff. It's just like with an essay, you don't have fluff, right? Every word should count. Your introduction, your interview and how you interact with your guest, and then your audio and sound. Making sure that you're clear, it's easy to hear you. The music is not, the music doesn't come on and then it's like, what, I can't hear what you're saying. And that type of stuff. I recognize that this is not a public speaking class. So for example, with the banned book video project, I'm always more lenient on those types of things, even though I still, I am, unless it's egregious, is when I'll start kind of, okay, we need to maybe talk a little bit about, polishing that elocution or polishing your professional presentation a little bit. And I'm not perfect by any means. I always have work to do because, like I said, I live in my head and I have a tendency to drift off. So even though it appears that I'm present, I'm not. But anyways, so as always, look at the rubric, because that's how you know how you're being assessed. And that's where I'll end it there. It's been a great term. I've really enjoyed reading all of your work and hearing about all of your experiences that have been relevant to a lot of the things that we've been reading about and learning about. It's been really eye-opening. And I look forward to making this course even better. And I hope that I can do that with some of the feedback that I will hopefully get from a lot of people. So other than that, I'm available to talk. Either I can meet virtually one-on-one. Remember, the virtual communication lab is available. You can email me, you can send me a message via Canvas. Otherwise, I wish you guys a really good last week of this course, and that's it. and I will try to remember how to click the stop record button. Okay, bye.